So, welcome everybody to the circle. My name is Brian Piergrosi. Great to be with all of you. It's a joy and a pleasure and an honor to be here. Lots of great things are happening. I want to give you some updates really quick. First off, I have guests, featured guests in the circle. So, Shawn King will be our featured guest tonight. I'll be telling you a little about him shortly. And so we'll have a featured guest. I have featured guests like all the way up through June. And so we'll have featured guests and we'll get to know them and share with them in the first part. And then the second part, people can ask questions and engage in the conversation. And so I'm excited about that. You guys can share with me people you'd like to be featured guests, and we can invite them on to join us. You could be featured guest yourself. Um, so lots of possible potentialities, but I think it'll be great to have people from different angles and perspectives and walks of life and sharing their wisdom and their authentic wisdom with us. So excited about that. Also, the podcast will be numbered now. So this is episode 37, and next week will be 38. And guess what's after that? 39. So that's I think helpful. It wasn't as hard as I thought to make that happen. I have a couple public events to tell you about coming up. So well, first off, the men's mastermind. We'll get started in the next season this coming Wednesday, 6 p.m. So we have a couple spots available. So if you'd like to join us for that, let me know, and we will see if you're a resident fit, and if you'd like to, and see if you're something that's worth being a part of. It's we have 8 people in there now, and I think we have space for 10. So let me know if that's something you'd like to be a part of. April 26th will be in Fletcher, North Carolina, which is just I guess southeast, east or south, Jacob? Just right
East,
near
southeast. Yeah.
southeast. Yeah, there you go. Both end. Southeast, just southeast of Asheville. We're leading a breathwork. First breathwork we've led since January 1st. So that will be themed God's Healing Love. That'll be at Generational Grounds. I already have a lot of people here registered, and excited to see all of you in person and see what opens up in that space together. May 17th will be in Charleston, South Carolina for an afternoon breathwork retreat there. And then June 7th, we'll have a one-day retreat at our place here in Southwest Virginia. And then September 5th to the 7th, a full 3-day digital detox retreat at Christ Mountain Retreat Center in Black Mountain, North Carolina. So excited about that. Kind of feels like it's kind of a next level we'll be jumping into. Personal sessions continue. If you're interested in personal sessions with me, let me know. Contributing to support what we're doing here, this unique, crazy, wild, awesome, amazing project is at patreon.com, the big glow. I don't want to do any ads or anything like that. I just want it to be community supported. So your support's appreciated. And I think that's it for the announcements. You can use the chat to type things in. We check them you know and address what people share in the chat. And Shawn King. Hi, Shawn.
Hi,
Welcome.
Brian. Thanks for inviting me to join tonight.
Yeah. So Shawn and I go back to the beginning.
It's true.
We go back to the beginning, to the heart of the creation. So we go back to the beginning of the Big Glow. He was really the one who like really um, helped me kind of found things and grow things and swapped ideas back and forth. And we're at the very beginning of the early retreats together. I remember I was in Davis, California, and I had this idea of like, oh, we just need people to come together, like people who are on a conscious path, people who are on an intentional path. Like, I just feel like people need to come together and like have like a retreat or something. And, I didn't really know how to make that happen, but I just like kind of just contacted people and just kind of asked if people could come together for a meeting and discuss it. And Shawn came and he was, passionate about the idea as well, saw the value of it. So we just started having retreats and just people coming together and just experimenting and seeing what would happen. It's really kind of fun to reflect back when the retreats first started. As you guys know, I'm very into being in the now, being in the moment, the importance of being in the moment, being present in the here and now. So the idea was let's have like a 3 day, 4 day retreat where there's no time and there's no one knows what time it is. So Shawn made a clock and the clock said 1 o'clock now, 2 o'clock now, 3 o'clock now. So it said now, 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 now. It was all now, all around the clock. So he'd bring the clock, the clock would just say now. And we literally didn't know what time it was the whole time. And the idea was just to really like just be open to the moment and see what would arise in the moment. Um, and then we really kind of, I think one of our passions too was we would call it different things. You know, Shawn called it direct relating. It's called authentic relating by some people, conscious communication, but just kind of really looking at the communication level and um, how do we come to a place where we can discover the truth together. I think, and kind of being in a space, and it feels like that's more important now than ever, where people can really be um, have an agenda and want to push their personal agenda and want to manipulate people with their personal agenda and not be interested in not only not be interested in the truth for themselves, but not be interested in other people discovering the truth, right? So we kind of this interesting dialogue last week. Pastor Mark was here, and it was kind of like this point of like, well, what to me, I was asking like, well, how do you even know what's true? Right? I'm really fascinated by that question because if you miss that step, then nothing else is even going to matter because you're going to have all kind. It's almost like you know, you have like a microscope to look for something, but you have the wrong lens in or something, so everything looks discolored and like uh, misshaped, and it's like if you don't have a clear lens to be able to see and discover what's true or be interested in what's true, like how do you discover that? How do you look into that? What is the mechanism to know what's true? If you see something, how do you know if it's true or not true? Right? So if someone tells you something's true, if NBC News tells you something's true, or the New York Times or Fox News or whatever, or your neighbor or your dad or your priest or your boss or your daughter, or how do you know what they're saying is true? It seems like it's the most fundamental question of all, right? And then, if you're looking at something, how do you know what you're thinking is true? How do you know what you're feeling is true? How do you know? It feels like that's the starting point. And then if you have that down, then you can kind of discuss anything and explore anything, and you'll be able to discover what's true. So we would kind of have these kind of lengthy inquiries in that way. We'd have groups that would kind of explore in this way. Um, and I think what we would discover is there's a truth in the process itself, I would say, Shawn, that's even more important than the intellectual conceptual answer. Not that it's not important, but that's not what's most important. Like there's something in the process itself that becomes alive, that is a deeper truth than the conceptual truth that may or not be arrived at. Um, so I don't know, like as far as introductions, I don't know if we need to say anything about you. Just I would say you're a philosopher, you're a musician, there's a term Renaissance man. You're a Renaissance man. You're a man of many integrated hats.
Yes, and many forms of play, I guess I would say. I like to play with mud, sticks, and rocks and build
Oh,
houses,
he's a
houses
builder. Yeah,
especially. Yep.
he's
So,
cob cottage builder.
mhm. Yeah, I've done that, and it's one of the things I'm most active with in Crestone recently. Actually, is teaching in that realm, teaching and demonstrating and researching. Crestone is blessed with a fantastically, in fact, one off in the world. There's nothing, no place quite like it anywhere. Place of experimentation with alternative approaches to shelter and building. There's a very strong community here around that. But returning to our themes, Brian, yeah, I think part of that inquiry, the idea of getting, if you would, finding the ground of truth, if you would, so that you can have a grounded stance to be able to explore from. Um, I think there are a few pieces that myself and my then partner Melissa kind of uncovered and worked towards finding a way to articulate. One of them is in what I call the realms of truth, that I think are people get confused sometimes, in the sense that if we want to ask, well, in what ways is something true or not true, and is truth in fact the same thing? For example, um, is an inner truth different from an exterior truth? These kinds of questions, I think those kinds of things become really important. Um, and for myself, I tend to want to work with realms of truth in the sense of, okay, emotional truth. What am I actually feeling? Am I being
Yeah.
honest with myself? And am I being clear in how I communicate that to someone else? Um, it doesn't really make sense if you think about it. Does it make sense to make a feeling wrong, to try and make your own feeling wrong? Say, oh, I must be feeling something else, or I must not be feeling this at all. Does it make sense to make someone else's feelings wrong, in the sense of trying to convince them that something is happening for them inside, in their inner experience, that they're not actually experiencing? Um, I don't think it does. I think that that is a realm of truth in and of itself, to kind of explore and to find ways to share. And I think part of what can happen, Brian, in sort of a communal setting where you have people who are exploring these kinds of questions, is that each person understands that the others that they may be encountering are in this inquiry, and have an interior truth or an emotional truth that they may wish to share, and that they're going to do their best to share it clearly with you. Um, and so I think that being able to, if you would categorize, I don't want to get too analytical, but if you would categorize the realms of truth, that's one of them. I think one of them is sort of the facts in the world, the things that you can videotape or measure or something like that, and have someone else there with you who could videotape and measure and so on in the same way, and basically find out the same thing. Um, and and those are two really significant realms of truth. And there may be others, any number of others realms of truth. But I think what's for me in that inquiry, what's interesting and perhaps important is, what is the nature of each of those realms, and how do we understand a distinction between them? And how is that distinction useful in getting really clear about things? So here's another realm, just quickly. Um, I guess I would say that fact is a type of truth, but it's not all of it. And that something like a myth can be true
Mm.
in a way that's non-factual. And I think that one of the things that's happened with modern and technological human beings is that they've sort of lost the, um, I don't know, the muscles of the psyche that work upon myth to a large degree, and myth has sort of left our experience and our culture. Um, and um, and that kind of storytelling is a storytelling that's sort of like, you know, catching, kind of sort of like can catch the truth like a mirror catches light, but it's not information, and it's not about information.
It's Pablo Picasso has this great line where he says, "Art is a lie that tells the truth." I think that kind of like says it really well,
Yes, I like that
you
a
know?
lot.
Yeah.
Uh,
I think also just to bring out one other component is um, what I find fascinating is you and I have, and we're not alone in this. I think it's pretty common. The vision that we see for what's possible in the world
mhm.
is pretty much the same, I would say. And I think a lot of people probably, most people, maybe everyone in here shares the same vision. I haven't asked everybody, but I would say the majority of the people at least share the same vision. And then I think where it gets interesting is like, what is the strategy to move toward that vision, right? And so it's interesting because there could be different strategies. And because there's different strategies, um, it may seem like somebody is your enemy or your opponent. Um, and it's possible that their strategy may be faulty, but I think it's like valuable to just kind of realize that like most all of us want the same thing. We want to create the same future together, and there can be different strategies to get there. And so I think why that's important is because then you can talk about the strategies and you can find out which strategy is the true best strategy in the moment to reach that place, to get to that place. Does that make sense?
Yeah, I think I understand, and I would agree with that. And I think part of what's interesting about that is that in doing that, engaging in that process, um, either person, the speaker or listener, however, whoever is sharing,
Hmm.
kind of gets that opportunity to distinguish their strategy from the ground truth, and also the sort of the realm of truth that is the realm of possibilities.
Hmm.
Right? Because if you imagine something as possible, that has a certain kind of truth to it. That it's true that
Well,
it's a possibility, right? You're holding it as a possibility, and therefore it has a certain truth to it, and it may be an important one for you. But I think that that's a really understanding strategy is really important, and I think that the first thing that pops into my mind is the two-word phrase "get local,"
right.
because I'm in a very mixed environment here. I mean, I have all kinds of characters that I'm interfacing with. As I like to say, Colorado is a purple state, meaning that, the politics, the social priorities, lifestyles are, very broadly different. And Crestone is a total melting pot of all kinds of people. And so what happens is, because you're with the people and you encounter them wherever, grocery store, you're having a conversation, you're walking the dog, you're walking by the creek, there's this opportunity to have that become the ground of truth. And then you can more easily have conversations and see each other in ways that would be impossible if you were not in proximity, in the world of fleshy proximity. We could face to face.
Yeah, and I think that's one of the top strategies we share in of itself is go local. You
Mm-hmm.
know, I call it decentralization of like coming down into yeah, interfacing human to human connection,
Mm-hmm.
direct connection with the land. Yeah, GL's been talking about. He was talking about this a couple weeks ago as well. You know, a lot of people are kind of realizing like, oh, we kind of lost some again, sort of basic, obvious truths. But I think that's you made me think of something is like, yeah, people have the same vision, but there are a lot of people that become cynical and think it's not possible.
Mm-hmm.
So that might be worth like, okay, you know, is that so? So if they think it's not possible, then maybe they go just into like, well, I'm just want to get what I can for myself, or more of a cynical way of like moving through the world. So maybe there's some healing that people need, some people need. But the ways I think that's really interesting is to kind of bring it to like the time we're in is you have the place that you want to create, the world you want to create. So then what's the strategy to get there? So there may be a situation where it's like for this particular issue, like using the government is the best strategy to get there. for this particular issue, not using the government is the best strategy to get there. For this particular issue, um, using the gifts of the feminine is the best way to get there. For this particular issue, at this particular moment in time, using the gifts of the masculine is the best way to get there. So it kind of makes the whole conversation become interesting and ongoing and alive and dynamic in a way that we don't really have in the collective in the collective communication right now. Like I think these conversations could be really interesting, and they're not. You know, when the way they come across the media, they're not interesting conversations. They're not even conversations.
Mhm.
So I think like creating that foundation of like, you know, what's the strategy? Let's inquire. Let's look at like what's the best way to get there. And the best way the reason why it's interesting is because the strategy is going to change. It's not going to be the same. It's going to change. Um, it could change uh, week by week, you know, month by month, day by day, moment by moment. It could change. It could be the opposite of what it was previously, right? So it's like this is where the being present comes in. To be present and to be vigilant, to keep like being attentive to what's the strategy, what's the way to get to the place, you know, the world we want to create together.
Don't we sometimes talk about in the like with the law of attraction that it's really good to have the visualization of where you want to go, but if you jump to strategy too quick and you try to humanly figure it out in your head, then then it doesn't happen as easily as if you maybe the strategy comes to you and you're not, like in a in you get inspired by something.
I think if you jump to it too quick, yeah, I always say the how comes second. So having the clear vision first, right?
Mhm.
But if I have a dream of going to Thailand, you know, at some point I got to figure out how I'm going to get there, right? So there needs to be like a strategy, and get really okay. What money, you know, airlines, you know, budget, hotels, you know, there's a lot involved, and I think a lot of times people don't have the ability to maintain the focus to like do the kind of tedious type work to make big dreams happen and have a strategy and be able to follow. And then again, like I remember talking with this guy. This guy was a successful businessman. I always remember what he told me because I was talking with him and it was like on a phone call. But he was a Texan, so he had like this Texas accent, and he's like, "Plan A never works. Plan B never works. Plan C never works."
Mhm.
Uh, but it's true. It's like I think the people that are really successful, they don't get stuck in rigid, like, oh, this is the way I thought it was supposed to go. So I'm just going to keep banging my head against this wall. You know, there's like, okay, I tried this direction and it's not going the way I thought it was going to go. So let me reassess and refine the strategy and just keep doing that until you get where you're supposed to go. Now, there's like doing that on the individual level, right? And then I think doing that, and Shawn and I have talked about this a lot, doing that on a collective level, community level, is much harder, particularly in our society, because we're just not conditioned for it. Like we don't know how to talk to each other. We don't know how to get along with each other. We're conditioned to be kind of individual. We're in an individualistic society, you know. So if you can get along with one person, you know, if you can get along with like a wife or a husband or a partner, like that's pretty amazing. Like in our society, let alone like, you know, a group of people or a family, you know. So I think that's just acknowledging that, okay, that's something that's important and we can get stronger at it and learn how to communicate with each other and listen to each other and and be able to hear different strategies to determine uh, what's the best strategy, you know, in any particular moment in time.
And sometimes something really, really unusual can just like fall in your lap when you get really excited about what the vision is and what you want and the more energy and the more enthusiasm you give it, like the speedier something, and you might just like walk into a coffee shop and somebody says, "Hey, there's a boat leaving to da 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 da," and you
Yeah,
go,
yeah,
"Oh,
yeah. Well,
you know."
that's another great point because that's another big problem I see in the collective consciousness. I really think the media is a major problem because the media, think of the media as kind of like our communication lines, like where, the mass communication through the world goes through these different media outlets. And so that's a great point of like if people are excited and inspired about the future, then they have the energy to like move towards it. But what I see is, most people seem to be uh, pretty pessimistic about the future, pretty afraid of the future, um, angry about the present and the future. And so that kind of energy is not gonna feel inspiration and creativity and
Mhm.
um, you're right. So this goes back to Sean's point of like local. So I think the idea of like the whole world's going to come together and we're going to be like yeah, maybe in some really far off step, I hold that vision. But I think starting at the local level, starting at like this kind of level, right? Like if you have 12 people and they can have a harmonious uh, communication together and be be having holding a vision for what's possible and creating the steps to get there. And people can watch this and they can look at, oh, this is inspiring. I see this group of people and they're coming together in community and they're they're showing a model of how a group can communicate and how they can work toward creating the future that's exciting and inspiring and more beautiful uh, and dynamic and actualized. So I always come back to that too of like leading by example. Feels like that's instead of like trying to tell other people, what they need to do. That always feels like that's a key component within oneself and then within a community of people. Any reflections, Sean?
I think it reminds me of our early experiments with the retreats, which were experiments in community on
Yes.
on a pretty realistic level. And one of the things that strikes me about it is our very first retreat, we started with a model that was organized and scheduled, and people signed up for things. So Sunday at 3, I'm cooking this particular meal or whatever it is, right? And then we had a bell ringing to announce when things were changing, and so on. And so we started with this idea of kind of leaning into, putting our faith into, however you want to communicate it, structure. But then we found all the kinds of friction that arise in that situation. I think at one point we were putting comments in a hat, and I think your comment was, "I hate being the bell ringer."
That's
You were
funny.
the one who would have to who agreed to ring the bell that would interrupt whatever anybody was engaged with to remind them to go do the thing they were supposed to do. And so we tossed all of that out and decided to lean into and put faith into what I guess I would identify as collaboration. Let's get together and create this in the now with no particular idea of exactly what it has to be or what a person has to do. And that's what the big glow retreats evolved into very quickly, and that model was kind of the core of it for quite a while. And I think that's a really important lesson because I think it speaks to how to show up or this state of being that's most likely to be effective in what I would call relocalizing. Our ability to localize ourselves with others who are doing the same, so that we might connect directly in the world, and encounter each other in a way that we could collaborate, and I think those are very powerful, transformative um, ways of being or ways of showing up or things to do, um, especially given sort of media being sort of like a bulldozer to our coming at our attention. Whether it's YouTube or Instagram or whatever, it's such an overpowering force on our attention in the realm of attention. It's they're overpoweringly distracting um, and yeah, just overwhelming. to relocalize and realize that no matter who you're with, you can have an inquisitory dialogue about how things are for each person. You can have a collaboration, even if it's very basic, like dancing in mud together to build a cob house. It's a very straightforward, very earthy collaboration.
And also, I think I guess what I want to say too that feels important to me, and this is something that some people in this group have been struggling with family members and stuff. But you can have when you have this kind of a style of communication and dialogue, you can have different views on things and still be friends.
Mm-hmm.
It doesn't, it almost, in a way, it kind of makes it more interesting. Um, because you're both interested in the truth, so you're kind of exploring different angles together with the intention that you will discover more of the truth through dialogue and communicating with each other, right? And so it's like when I think of you and I think of like we're in like a an ongoing conversation that was never going to end. It's not like, oh, we got, it just goes on forever. And
Mm-hmm.
I think that's a good way to think of like any friendship or any relationship or any relating, as we used to say,
Mm-hmm.
relating being the verb as opposed
Right.
to relationship being the noun. So relating is like when you're relating with somebody, it's just an ongoing conversation. And it just goes on and on and on. And sometimes you're like, oh yeah, we see it exactly the same. And but now some new information came, and now I'm seeing something different. What are you seeing? Well, I'm seeing this. What are you seeing? You know? So it's just kind of like a relating is kind of like, this is what I'm feeling right now. What are you feeling? Oh, okay. Thanks for sharing. This is what I'm seeing right now. What are you seeing? Right. This is right. So it's like it's just this kind of like you're going back and forth, back and forth, back and forth. And so then imagine doing that with like, you know, four people or five people or 10 people or 20 people,
Mm-hmm.
you know, and beyond that. And so that I think it's a very different way um, of just almost what the point is or what the intention is
Mm-hmm.
of relating.
Yeah, it's a dance of understanding, if you would, the
Mhm.
understanding dance to try to getting into understanding with each other. Um, and the with each other kind of becomes for each other. I think that's part of the there was a bonding aspect of these retreats that was kind of delicious and special and rare. I think because we had to collaborate and co-create. We weren't kind of up in our minds about the schedule and the next thing and missing something and this and that and the other. We were with
The
each other in a real sense.
the being is more important than the doing. I think
Yes,
that's yeah,
and the doing that comes from the being
is
winds
much
up
better.
being a better,
Yeah,
serves everyone better
yeah,
than the doing that comes from the doing and the planned doing.
yeah, yeah.
And when people can, I love it when people can agree off the bat that, like, I can agree, I may not be seeing the whole picture.
Right.
And that's so fun, to know that to leave a window open, like, what part of the picture are you seeing? Oh,
Yeah,
okay. And I'm also seeing this part of it. Oh, okay. It's like the blind men around the elephant.
yeah. Yeah, it's what makes human relating fun. It's like I would actually say it's impossible to see the whole picture. Like there's no way I could see the whole picture. That's why I
Yeah.
talk to other people. So through talking to other people, I can see more of the picture, right? And
Yeah,
so
not trying to convince people of something, but this is just what I'm seeing, oh, okay.
yeah,
And you can take
and I
it or leave
think
it.
we touched on this before, but I think that's one of the real problems right now with social media is and the algorithm is people are getting siloed where all they're getting is the reinforcement of their previous
Mm-hmm.
ideas, you
Yeah.
know. So it's like so shocking when they hear something that's like different than it's almost like they can't even like a mental breakdown, It's like it's like it's important to be able to be exposed to different perspectives and want to see more of the picture.
Yeah.
Yep. And
I
I think it's,
also
Go
oh,
ahead,
go ahead.
Gio.
I think it's important as well to for the person themselves to be open to other ideas. Because I was thinking of this quote. When I was in undergrad and university, I took a lot of philosophy courses, and I'm very grateful for all those philosophy classes because basically what those classes did is it taught me how to critically think. And the problem with human beings is that if you study psychology, it's pretty evident that most of us have biases, and those biases come from, like how we grew up, the culture we grew up in, the certain belief systems that we have, et cetera, et cetera. And, it's not to say that those biases are bad. Sometimes biases are actually good things because we can make those snap decisions, right, in a second. Um, and it kind of helps us have like an orientation on the world, right? But the problem comes when, again, it comes to finding out what truth is. And I think uh, when it comes to coming to truth in a community, you also have to be open to wanting to hear from other people as well. Because I've noticed that a lot of people, especially as my dad was saying, because of the way the modern world is, where people are in their own echo chambers, when you hear an alternative idea, you kind of just like a lot of people just denounce it entirely without ever listening to it or without ever, saying, oh, maybe there's something here that I can, extract value from. But again, I think it starts with first forming those relationships because if you don't have a relationship with somebody, if you don't have a connection, if you don't have any rapport, then it's going to be hard for them to even trust you or want to hear you. So first, it's creating that like friendly environment, relating on mutual things, having finding things that there are shared values between. Because I guarantee you, you can talk to somebody with an entirely opposite belief system and ideology or whatever, and you can still find commonalities. You can still find things, common goals, common things that you value. And starting with those things, and then also, then having that open dialogue. But one quote in particular that I kind of thought of um, earlier was this quote by Aristotle, and it's the mark of an educated man to entertain an idea without accepting it. So basically, what that means is that if you can take on an idea and think about that idea without accepting it right away, and that also means your own ideas as well, right? Like if you have an idea about something, again, like there is that intuitive aspect, which I think, there's that gut feeling, which I think most of the time that's correct. I think a lot of people like ignore that, especially because in modern society we're very intellectual, we're very like uh left-brained or whatever. So I think, we're very stuck in or sorry, right-brained. We're very stuck in, this logical thinking. And I think again, if you can listen to your intuition, but also at the same time be critical, like try to really question the ideas you hold, try to question the ideas that other people try to get you to believe in or the media promotes or whatever. And doing that in my life has actually made me somebody that I find myself having a hard time believing in these different dichotomies. Like I usually find myself somewhere in the middle. I usually find myself having some ideas over here, some values over here. So I think the way to truly come to truth when it comes to other people is it starts with also being open and really opening not only yourself up to hearing other people's ideas, but also being critical of the ideas you already hold. I think that's one thing that people don't acknowledge enough, but it's really important because, again, you might be wrong about something or you might be right, and somebody else has to be open to hearing what you have to say as well. So I think that's a really important thing.
Being open to learn.
Who
Exactly.
was the person that you quoted that said that, the mark of an educated man?
I think it was Aristotle, who is one
Okay,
of my
I like
favorite
that.
philosophers. He was a
Yeah.
ancient Greek philosopher. I think he studied under Plato, but he was a very a very intelligent philosopher, I think. A lot of modern philosophy is kind of based off of his ideas. So
Yeah, I
Sean and
really like
I,
that one.
Sean and I would do this. Sean was a big fan of this. I remember I called it inquiry dialogue,
Mhm.
and there was a few different components. I'm not going to go through all of them right now, but the one that I want to point out, I think it ties into Geo's thing of being able to ask questions and being curious. So we'd have a group uh, communicating with each other, and one of the agreements was you would end every uh, what do I even call it? Every communication with a question. So you know how like you're talking to somebody and they go, "Well, this is how it is," and you're like, "Okay, well, I guess there's nothing else to say then if that's how it is, right?" But if you kind of open up in a question, it opens everyone up to go deeper. And then they go deeper and they go deeper, right? So even you can you can say something that sort of comes across as like this is my perspective, but then I could just even say like, what do you think about that? All right, just that simple, right? So now it opens up to like going deeper into my perspective. So sometimes it's like I have a question and here's my question, and then someone has a question to that question, um, and then someone's like, well, this is how I'm kind of seeing that, and how do you think about that? So I just find uh, that kind of intention of um, moving things in a form of a question opens up the space to go deeper, right? As opposed to just people making statements at each other.
Mhm. It's
It's kind
also
of
an indicator that you're that if I end something with a question, it's an indication that I'm ready to listen to someone's answer.
Right.
So it indicates my openness to others, and I think that's an important part of that process.
yeah, they say it's like kind of like a friendly game of catch.
Hmm.
You know, before you throw something and you do it so that it makes it easy for the person to get it, and then you wait for that person to actually catch it and hold it for a while, and they're thinking about it, and then they throw it back to you carefully, you know. Whereas
Hmm.
some people, I don't know, I have a friend, I keep getting a picture of like one of those tennis ball machines that shoots the tennis ball at you, and it's fast and vigorous, and I'm like, whoa.
Yeah, you could start your YouTube channel and shoot tennis balls at a million people all at once.
Yeah.
Right. Right.
I I want to jump in here for a sec if I may.
Mm.
And
Yes,
I've
sir.
been listening. What is true? I mean, I've just since the other day you've mentioned it several times. Um, and me personally, I've struggled with that. Um, how do you know something is true? And respecting, I think, because I mean the elephant in the room. People live in such polarizing truths today. You were talking about,
Yep.
the purple state, and I think that we have to address the fact that there are, I'll just call them, I mean, the forces of consciousness and the forces of unconsciousness. There is a certain energy, a group, the media that are pushing lies, that are trying, you remember the old fascist adage, if you tell a lie enough times, it becomes truth. And so there is, I think, very important to recognize that there are people, groups, interests that on purpose are pushing deception and lies, trying to convince people that something that isn't true is true. And that's one aspect you were talking, Sean, about. I love that term, the realms of truth, because there's your individual truth, of course, it's your personal truth based on, like you was saying, your own, where you were born, how you were raised, your belief system, what a human tells themselves is true. Your belief system, which is also very important to respect other people's truths they have for themselves. You know, I lived for a long time, like in this a program where I was convinced of what I believed, and if you believe different, I was going, you are wrong, and I'm going to prove to you. And I've broken that program. I don't live in that programming anymore. I've learned to respect that the truth others have accepted for themselves. I have to respect that truth, even if it's different than mine. So, and that has to do with free will. Respect, because we can see it now, like the political scene that you were referring to. You have the two sides that are living in completely different things, believing different things that are true. And each side is absolutely convinced that they are absolutely right and that the other side is absolutely wrong, right? So who's right and who's wrong? What is the truth there, right? And so, I mean, we could go into that for a long time. I don't want to get too political about it, but I think it's ultimately, and speaking of the realms of truth, in my search for the truth, the truth about myself, humanity, what God really is, love and all that, which has been, from an early age. I believe that there is at the highest levels of consciousness an absolute eternal truth, which is the love, the divine love from, divine creator. I believe that, uh, and that is at the core of my being and every being, but it's not
Can I
very
suggest an upgrade to your languaging, Antonio? Instead of
sure.
saying believe, a different word perhaps, because the thing about believe for me is when someone says, I believe in God. Well, if you believe, I'm not saying that you said that exactly, but I'm just giving an example.
Hmm.
Someone says, like, someone asks me, do you believe in God? That word believe means like, I don't know that it's true. It's like, well, I believe it. You know what I mean? Like, there's something deeper than believe. Like if I'm looking at that tree out there, I don't have to believe it's there. I'm looking right at it. Right. So just pointing that out of like, I believe
Hmm.
this is true. I believe that's true. I don't think it's a
Hmm.
belief. I think it's like, it's true or it's not true.
Well, it's a knowing. I mean, it's
Yes,
definitely
it's
a
a
knowing.
knowing. Yeah.
But I mean, in the language of expression, beliefs, what people hold, what they accept for themselves to be true.
Yeah. But it's
Your
interesting
core.
because remember Sean was talking about myth because you can believe something and it can be true that you believe it as well. So that's a separate thing, right?
Hmm.
Like I can believe in fairies, like in the field out here, but I haven't seen them, but I can believe they're
Hmm.
there, and that can be true that I believe them. And so it's interesting because that's why I think that's an important distinction.
Hmm. Again, I was, where we derive meaning, where a human gets the meaning or the truth for themselves. We first, when we're born, we inherit that, and it's the funny thing is, um, especially religious or spiritual beliefs initially are geographical accidents. Most people inherit,
Right.
their first definitions from wherever they're born, right?
Yep.
Their parents. Many people never question whatever they inherited and they just follow it. Some people start questioning from a very early age and actually research their own definitions. Some people are walking around with inherited definitions, inherited truths. Some people have reached for the truth of meaning of stuff on their own, and their definitions and their truth comes from their own personal experiences and researching. That's my case. That's how I consider what I hold to be true for myself, okay, is from my experience of searching for the true meaning. And so when you're talking about the true meaning of stuff, and it is, again, it's so subjective, because I've come to understand that the importance of respecting the truths other have for themselves. It's at me because whatever truth others have for themselves is perfect for them, even if it's opposed to mine. I respect their right to their truth for themselves because it's their truth based on their own experience. And so even if they're opposite to whatever I hold to be true, I respect that that's their truth. And I absolutely respect their right to it. And I don't contest it or try to prove them wrong. I don't believe that they're wrong. I believe their truth is perfect for them. This has actually teaching myself to think this way has freed me from conflict because I lived in conflict for a long time in that other time frame where I know the truth and it's yours is different, and I'm going to prove to you that you're wrong and yada yada yada. You know what you were saying before, Robin. Holding the possibility that I may be wrong. Maybe what I hold to be true is not entirely true, but it's true right now based on my life experience. But it can change. There is that room for further growth and further discovery. So again, I think when you speak about the truth, it's a very deep and complex subject, even just the definition of it, because of what that what that word and what's each person holds true for themselves. So, I think we could just go on for, weeks and weeks on this subject, how
I
Yeah.
this
think
stuff
I
is true.
think I think an important inquiry is subjective truth, which you brought up, versus subjective truth. Like, are there certain objective truths? I think that's an interesting inquiry.
Well, again, what Sean was talking about earlier, and you just mentioned, like the physical universe. We don't have to debate. There's a tree, we both see it, we can replicate it, we can measure it, and there's many things about the physical universe, which of course now quantum physics and many metaphysical, it's like, oh, the physical realm is not real and whatever, and that's a whole other subject. But um, we share the physical realm, the physical universe, which is the measurable, tangible 3D, which we can kind of agree upon. The harder truths or the more difficult truths are the untangible, the unseen, the invisible. You know, that's where I think there's more debate. And again, where for myself, again, I've learned to respect that others have other truths for themselves that may be opposed to my own, but I don't challenge them anymore. I respect whatever truths others have for themselves, even if they're opposed. And like I said, going back to the original comparison, look at the state of how polarized, and this is, I think, it's done on purpose, how these two ultimate realities are facing each other of who's telling the truth and who are the good guys or who are the bad guys, like on the political scene or whatever. And both sides are convinced they're right. Both sides are convinced the other guys are, and both sides are foaming at the mouth with all of this negativity. And I think that's by design. I try to, like, that's why I used to be very political. I'm not anymore. I was like, I just observe it. It's like, okay, that's
Mhm.
going on. you know, Try not to get involved in it anymore. Just observe it because it's, anyway.
Sean, any
So
reflections?
Yeah, I'm thinking, and this will become tangible to how it relates to the conversation right now in a moment. Is that one of the ideas that I've played with to understand things better is the idea that words are kind of like boxes, and we can pass them back and forth without opening them, and think that the person that we're passing boxes to agrees or has the same understanding of what's in the box as we do. And so there's a whole way of having conversations where you explore the meaning of what you say, the word that you are saying, the word using, and what that word means to the other person and what their words mean to you, etc., to open the path of more clarity and depth. And so when I hear the word respect, coming from you, Antonio, I'm like, that's what I'm curious. It's like, well, what do you mean by respect? And then also asking myself the same question, what do I mean by respect? And I think the answer that popped up for me, just to share that in the space here, was, well, when I'm respecting something, there are two things that are fundamental that are going on. One is that I'm recognizing what the other person is holding. I'm just recognizing it as, well, they're holding it. Therefore, it is one possible thing to hold. Here it is in the universe, in my experience right now. So I recognize it. And then the other half for me is that in recognizing it, I realize I can choose not to aggress against it, to be aggressive against it. And that allows me to, those two things put together allows me to have that kind of um, stance or position of peace inside that moment. So that's kind of what I was receiving in some of from your what you were saying, Antonio, about your long experience and your path, if you would, of realizing of this difference in what other people hold and then finding respect in it.
and I want to be really clear, and I totally understand you about, I mean, just defining meaning. I
Mhm,
mean, we could go, language, human language is a double-edged sword. It's at the
mhm,
same time wonderful way to try to express ourselves as clearly and exactly as we can, but at the
mhm,
same time, on the other side, it's very limiting. So it's
mhm.
human language is very, but I want to be very clear because I think I kind of glanced at what I want to be very clear. When I say I respect, the truth others have, I respect the right they have to their truth, not necessarily that I respect what they're saying and what they're doing.
Right.
As far as the meaning of respect, there is a
Mm.
lot of behaviors, terrible behaviors, and without getting into which side, but there's a lot of terrible behaviors that others, people who don't choose love, people who don't choose respect, and there's a lot of that right now. I don't respect their behavior. I don't respect, but I respect their right to whatever their free will, whatever they choose. That's, again, as far as also as beliefs, I respect the right people have to their beliefs, not necessarily that I respect their beliefs. So I just wanted to
Hmm.
make that
Hmm.
distinction.
Hmm.
If that's kind of what you were, you
Yeah,
know,
that's an aspect of it. So I'm understanding more what you mean by respect, and not, and that's distinct from understanding what respect means in some universal sense. It's what you mean by respect when you're
right.
using the word, and so that to me is the opening possibility here that's happening right in this moment with between the two of us, is that we're understanding each other more deeply and clearly in the dialogue in that way.
And I appreciate that. I
I
appreciate you
appreciate you.
elaborating. Yeah, because it is again, it's defining the words. It's meaning. What's the meaning of life? What's the meaning of meaning? I mean, let's get that one first, right?
Yeah,
Mhm.
one of the things we find that's important, especially when people haven't met before, is a lot of the time can be spent just, okay, what do you mean by this word? What do I mean by this word? Right. And really taking the time to, because every someone comes in with their particular map of language and what it means, and someone else comes in and the language of the words can be different. I think as people kind of commune more and connect more and spend more time together, the word they have a shared language, and then someone from outside comes in and then do the whole thing again, you know. So I appreciate Sean's it's kind of exemplifying that kind of presence and listening and care to be like, I really want to understand what you mean by this word, and kind of going deeper into feeling like he sees you and he gets you. So I thought that was a good exemplification of that.
I think
Yeah.
one part of that the importance of understanding the connotation of different words. One thing that I've noticed is like in the current modern, mostly like political climate, but it's in other things too. Um, a lot of people I think are very stuck in ego and they're very stuck in defensiveness. And instead of actually trying to, because for me, like I try to aim in a lot of conversations or debates, I try to aim for like what is the truth? Maybe this person has things I don't understand. Maybe this person um, has valuable things to say, and maybe we can come to some mutual agreement. But kind of as Antonio was saying, like, some people are very much just trying to prove their ideas are correct to somebody else. Like the first opportunity they have to have an argument with somebody, instead of it being, and I shouldn't say argument, I should say like debate, right? Or maybe like just having a conversation. The first moment that they have to have that opportunity, they just use that to prove their point. They just use that as like, hey, now I can now I have an opportunity to prove, what I believe about ABC, right? And it's just an opportunity to say what you want to somebody instead of it actually being an opportunity to like have a mutual understanding, to come to an agreement, to talk and learn different perspectives and actually understand why the person believes what they believe and why they have certain perceptions and so forth. So I think like an important thing is really to not be defensive and especially to not be emotionally reactive because I think that's another thing too. You see it on the news, right? Whenever you see these news channels, and this is just something I've noticed on both sides, right? Um, a lot of the media, the news, you see that these people are very emotionally reactive, right? And instead of whenever they have a guest speaker from a different perspective, instead of actually saying, oh, let's talk about this point, let's talk about that, it's like immediately just announcing them and calling them names and saying, they're this, that, and a third. And, it's really sad to see, in my opinion, what the modern kind of like I don't know, just like the modern debates and the modern discussions have come to, because instead of it being actually a general mutual search for truth, it's just become, I want to prove what I have to say, and if you don't agree with me, I'm going to call you names. I'm going to be emotionally reactive. I'm going to try to defend my beliefs. And I think again that comes from ego, because when people do a lot of meditation, maybe they take psychedelics, maybe they had like a spiritual experience. A lot of people drop these hardcore defensive beliefs that they have because they realize that there is a oneness, there is a shared community. We're all here, we're all parts of the divine in separate bodies, and there is something, there is value in what somebody else has to say. And so I think again, it's important not to get so caught in defensiveness, and not to get so caught in I need to prove what my idea is, because again, it's not to say that your idea is wrong, but it is to say that if you don't even give an opportunity to listen to what the other person says, or hear their perspective, or actually understand where they're coming from, there's not even a conversation at that point. There's not even a way of actually talking to this person. I think that's the reason why so many friendships and families are facing, division. And also, as Antonio said, like, I think that's probably intentional. I think a lot of that division is probably there for a reason. But again, I think the reason why a lot of that is again because people are stuck in ego, and they're stuck in holding on rigidly to what they believe. Because if you take away what they believe, then a lot of people, they're so, it's like their entire framework is going to be pulled away. Their entire understanding of the world is going to be pulled away. And I'm one of those people where I've already kind of pulled away my framework multiple times. I've thought about a lot of different things, and like I try to be very critical about every belief that I take on, but not a lot of people are like that. A lot of people, they're very, they really are focused on, a certain structure, a certain perception of the way the world works. And if you pull that from underneath them, if you say, oh, maybe that's not true, it's very, it's very dangerous for them, to lose their entire reality structure, right? So I think, again, like being more open to dropping your ego, and being less emotionally reactive, and being open, and really just seeing other people as human beings, because that's what they are, despite them having different belief systems, despite them having a different perspective on certain things, they're still a human being, and they still have those belief systems for a certain reason. They've came to those things for a certain reason. So I think the best thing that you can do is try to understand what that reason is. And also, again, going back to like the connotations, like understanding the way that they're using those words, and why they're saying those things in the first place. So,
Yeah, I think another really valuable level of truth is like when you're talking about like these like news shows and stuff, and like I'll watch that, and I'll see like this is not an authentic conversation. It's almost like you're watching like an actor, who has a script and a role to play, and there's a little bit of ad lib, but they're trying to get to a particular place and
it
get the
seems
audience
it
to think
seems very
something.
scripted.
Yeah, when I say scripted, I mean like I mean they do have their questions that they're told to ask, and they have something that they're trying to. So when you're having an authentic conversation, you're really interested in listening to what the other person has to say, to put it simply, right? And when it's not an authentic conversation, you're not interested in what the other person has to say. You're interested in trying to push an agenda, right? So so I think that's part of this like truth from falsehood is like observing something like that and being like, oh, this is not an authentic conversation. So I think the best thing that we could do is not tune in, right? And in not tuning in, we're not supporting this I don't know what to call it.
False programming.
False programming. We're not supporting it, right? And so then we're like, okay, well, what do I do? Because one of the things we talk about a lot is Don't focus on what you're against, focus on what you want to create, focus on what you're for, right? So what we can do is we can create authentic conversation. That's the answer I've come to. Is like if I see conversations not authentic, not tuning in because it's a waste of everybody's time, and then create conversation that is authentic. And I think that's what we're doing.
And if I can add a little bit on to what
Yeah, and
Gio was
somehow your
saying.
mic, something changed with your mic, Antonio. It's a little,
Oh,
yeah,
sorry, it was down there.
yeah,
There. Yeah, just adding a little bit to what Gio, and this is something I also had to like retrain myself. Nobody learning to listen. Most of the time, this happens to me with, I visualize in my healing. It was before I used to listen with my head, and the difference between listening with your head and listening with your heart, right? And so this happens to me, especially with family, where when you're having a conversation, you're not actually listening to the other person. You're actually listening to yourself, getting ready to answer the other person. And this is, you can see the key mark of this is when they interrupt you and try to finish your sentence, especially with close family. Close family are the worst at doing this because they know you so well, and so they finish, and they think they know what you're going to say and so forth. And I used to do this all the time. That's how I used to be. I didn't listen to the person halfway through. I would just interrupt and blah 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 blah. And so retraining myself to really listen to somebody, like you were saying, Brian, to being present and getting out of the head and listen, truly listening. Just and when you start doing that, for me, I'll tell you what, when I learned to listen, it turns out that the divine was speaking through others to me. That's where I got, all of a sudden these very clear messages, these synchronicities with what other people were saying by shutting up my head and listening with my heart. And so, learning to listen, I think, is like super important. And I wasn't taught this. I had to learn it on my
fully agree. I mean, listening is the most important component of all. One of the things I point out a lot is you could be saying the most beautiful, eloquent, articulate, insightful thing ever said, but if nobody's listening, then it doesn't matter, right? So like the listening is the key component in any communication and conversation. Like we do this opening in the opening circle of the big low retreats. We go around the circle, and every time I tell people, I'm like, this is not an exercise in speaking. This is an exercise in listening, right? This listening is the most important part, not the talking. And I think it really creates a quality of something dynamic, in the space.
Yeah, when it comes to people in politics, I think the thing I love most is seeing an in-depth interview with that person that's done in a really loving way, where they're really trying to help the person being interviewed express what they're about, and giving that person a chance, and being willing to see another side of them is
Yeah.
is really cool.
We live in an interesting time in that way. That's an interesting point because on the one hand, it's like the level of communication is getting worse and worse and worse,
Mhm.
right? Then you have this other thing where you have these like 3 hour unedited podcasts, that people are just having these extended conversations. I mean, look what we're doing here.
Mhm.
This is not going to be edited. So it's like we are kind of like, we're having the worst and the best at the same time. It's
Yeah.
kind of like someone was pointing this out with the music too. The music these days is just, I think it's objectively horrific. It's just really, really, even Gio's young and he's like, this music's terrible. I don't like it. Uh, but there's also like phenomenal music. It's not on the pop stations, but there's also phenomenal music being made as well. So it's like in the same thing with like, you can go to any area and it's like, we kind of are in a place where we can sort of, if we're conscious and intentional, we can plug into the good things that are happening,
Mhm.
and leave aside the bad things that are happening.
It's You could almost say that there are two paths, very clear, distinct paths, two timelines,
Yeah.
and this
Yep.
is, I think, this bifurcation. This is, I
Yep.
think, exactly what's happening.
Yep.
And there is the lower timeline of fear, hate, separation, divisiveness, stuck in the head, disconnected from the heart, where all that nasty music and all the
Mhm.
judging and all the, and then there's the one that we're on. There's a highway to heaven and a highway to hell. It's basically this is what, and it is a big, humongous individual and collective exercise of choice and the best use of free will, and we're all doing it. I think by joining in these circles, by expanding, I mean, and in so many places around the world. I mean, these are the choices that humanity, I think, has right now, and that is why I think that is actually the crux of this lifetime, is this very important choice. Are you going to choose love? Are you going to choose peace? Are you going to choose oneness? Are you going to choose compassion and empathy and beauty and joy? Or are you going to choose the opposite? And that's like the choice that I think the world is presenting. And I think it's very clear, you know, uh, where uh, where both timelines are. So yeah.
I think it's also like being aware that path that actually is the conscious path is even there. Because as you were saying earlier, Dad, in like the beginning, a lot of people have this pessimism and this like hopelessness, and you can almost feel it. It's almost like a sickness, in society. And I think again, that's also like a psyop, that's also something that's there for a reason because the more people that are depressed and anxious and hopeless, the less that there's a chance that there's going to be people that are conscious and actually want to have like a sort of conscious revolution, right? The more people that feed into that, oh, there's no solution, everything's going to hell, like there's never going to be an alternative, that's actually part of, what these, powers that be want. But also I think too, there's that saying like where there's a will, there's a way. So, if you are somebody who's and it's funny, Dad, because I think of you because you always tell me like, don't think of the problem, think of the solution. So that's kind of how I think about it too. It's like so many people are focused on the problems instead of like what the solution is. Like it's good to know what the problem is so you can have the solution, but there is a solution for every problem. And like whether that's in your personal life, whether it's in a community and for the world and society as a whole, the more that you can be oriented towards solution thinking and actually looking for opportunities because there are opportunities to have a better life, not just for yourself, but for the entire world. And the problem is that people, because they're so focused on the negative, they don't see the opportunities, they don't see the positive, they don't see the actual potential solutions. And if everyone's focused on the problems and no one sees the solutions, then that's a very bad recipe for, you know, society as a whole. So I think the more that we can be aware that there actually is opportunities there actually are changes that can be made. That's a really important thing to be aware of.
Yeah, it's an opportunity to play with words. You can ask yourself, am I probleming right now or am I solution right now?
Nice,
Right? So,
nice.
what is my action, and where is my attention? Paying attention is an action. So when you're directing your attention somewhere, when you're having attention, you're in action, I would say. I'll make that claim. And so that's something to think about because, I think I'm going to carry that forward because I think I am non-aware, I'm non-aware of my own probleming fairly
Mm,
frequently.
mm.
Um, and it's something that I can work on. And um,
I just had an interesting insight to what you're sharing, Sean. So
mhm,
paying attention. Paying
mhm,
implies like pay money, pay attention. And like when you pay money, there's a scarcity of money. So
mhm.
you need to be, so you, we all know that. So we have to be very mindful of what we pay money towards. Is this worth me paying money towards? I don't have an infinite number of them. I only have a certain amount of money. So is this something I should pay money towards or not? So it's interesting to think of paying attention. I'm thinking of it in the same way because attention actually, there's a scarcity of attention as well. Like there's only so much time in the day, there's only so much time in the week.
Mhm.
So you think of it that way, and it's like, wow, like where I put my attention is really important, you
Yeah,
know?
you have all the attention you're ever going to have. So how are you spending it? It's being spent somewhere.
Yeah. Yeah, it makes you really, look at it that way. It's like, you know, why did I just spend 20 minutes watching these stupid TikTok reel, whatever, as an example. Like there's a lot of things that I think we're probably doing throughout the day where we're like, this is not the best use of my attention, right? So maybe it's sort of like something that's uh, not helpful, but it's sort of neutral. It's kind of mindless, or maybe it's something that's actually destructive, right? And so really being mindful of where we're paying our attention, I think is really critical to be mindful of. I'll just share
One,
what. Yeah, go ahead, Robin. I'm gonna share one more
oh,
thing, and then we'll have some
okay.
closing
Uh,
thoughts.
yeah, one fun thing I'll do if I meet up with somebody who, um, I love peacemaking. That's like my biggest thing. If I meet with somebody who has an opposite viewpoint of mine, say politically or whatever, and we're there, and we're willing to talk about it, and I can tell they're so adamant about what they think, and maybe they know I'm from a different angle. What I'll do sometimes is just tell myself I'm not going to even try to make a point here. All I'm going to do is listen to this person and be kind and receptive and sympathetic to them. And and then let it go at that. And at least they can go away feeling heard and think, "Oh, well maybe that person from the other perspective, those people aren't so bad after all, you know?"
Nice. Yeah. Yeah, I was going to mention um, several of you here live were very inspired by the piece I wrote, Love is the New Religion.
Oh yeah.
And I think the reason that that was very, well, there's a lot of reasons, but one of the primary reasons that was very inspiring to people around the world is because it relates to, I think, the point that Gio was making of people can be caught, with the mainstream media and like the negativity and the pessimism and the cynicism and the fear and the anxiety and the worry and all this stuff. And it seems like that's all there is, right? So you kind of have this sense of like, well, and Gio and I have conversations about this. Like, it seems like if I step out into this more positive, conscious, intentional way of living, I'm just going to be alone. There's like nobody else but me. And it can even when you're on this path, it can't even feel like that initially because you don't know anybody that's, moving in this direction. And I think the thing that's so gratifying is you'll find when you make that step is there are other people like and you're not alone. And you'll start to meet those people and come in connection with them and come into resonance with them and come into friendship with them and maybe come into relationship with them. And they're there, and it's just a matter of us taking that step. And initially, it can feel like scary because the media will make you think like there this is the only option. There is no other world besides this world. But when you turn that off and you take that step, you'll have, I would say, much more authentic relationships. Real genuine relationships that are you know deep and meaningful and powerful.
And just before we go, I wanted to just finish up when I was talking about the two timelines because it sounds like once the negative timeline sounds very pessimistic, but truly, I truly, truly, truly hold that the vision um, that's only part of this illusion of separation. I know that on a much higher level of consciousness, love already won, and we're just walking through the motions of all of these lessons. And absolutely there is no soul that is lost or wasted. And even the ones making those choices that are, leading in down the path of unlove, you know, they will make it too. I mean, I'm absolutely convinced that ultimately, this is all kind of just a big, big experiment, and that ultimately we all return to, the source of divine love where we all come from. So I didn't want to sound pessimistic, like, those that are walking down that path are lost. I want to make sure that that message is, it's not. It's a learning experience. It's a learning curve, and they're going to have, that's part of this experiment. The choices, the consequences of your choices, and this free will experiment of unlove that we chose to participate in. that we're all in some way. But and so I just wanted to add that because I didn't want to seem like, oh, us, we're the saved ones and the other ones are lost. No, nobody's lost.
Yeah, thanks for that, Antonio. Uh, Robin, do you want to share? I can't, it's a long thing you
Oh,
wrote here. Do you want to just share it in words?
okay. Yeah, I just wrote, there's a girl I got turned on to yesterday. Her name is, I think it's Jordan Berman.
Hmm.
I don't know if anybody's heard of her, but she was invited to the White House to and she's a podcaster and she bills herself as being non-biased. I haven't watched enough to really know, but she seems really smart and she's extremely cute. And it's a little affected, it's a little, like marketed the way she does it, but she's really interesting to look at.
All
So
right.
I was just
We'll check that
just
out. Jordan Berman. Sean, closing thoughts,
Closing thoughts.
closing inquiries.
Closing inquiries.
So it continues, the conversation continues forever
Oh,
and
there you
ever.
go. Closing inquiries. What is the nature of community? I think that's a question. It's an open-ended question, meaning you'll never finish answering it.
Hmm.
I think it's a really valuable question to have, and I think it was a core question to the founding of the Biglow Retreat series to kind of reflect back on that. And then, another strong theme tonight has been listening.
Mm.
So another question I might have is, what is the shadow of listening?
Yeah. Yeah, I think the community is a very interesting one. Shadow of listening, that's interesting too. Wow. What is the shadow of listening?
Because I believe it does have a shadow, but I'd be interested to understand what other people find in that question.
The shadow of listening. You mean like listening to something that's toxic for you or
No, if listening has a shadow, because we all have our shadow aspects, is one way of understanding ourselves,
mm,
right? That's one way. Well, if we are listeners, what is the shadow of being a listener? I guess might be a better, what is your shadow when you are the listener? Or what is a possible shadow for you? It'd be
okay.
interesting to
I'm gonna
understand.
I'm gonna meditate on that one.
what's an example of a shadow? Maybe you could give us an example.
Oh, I'm actually borrowing that from the Jungian understanding of that, which is that it's a part of us that is unconscious and can be something that is destructive to us and outwardly,
Mhm.
if you would, or even inwardly, but that we tend to not to be aware of. And so part of Jung's idea about evolving as persons, growing as persons was to explore one's own shadows. So one could understand where one is, acting non-consciously in ways that may be, you know, may be destructive in some way, but that also may contain an energy that you could use positively if you were aware of it.
If you're unconscious of it, how could you know what it is?
Well, then that's when you're starting to ask. So,
Yeah.
is there something I'm doing non-consciously that's part of my shadow behavior here? And sometimes it takes another person to show you your shadow.
Yeah, I definitely hear another voice in my head,
Mhm.
I say this and then you think,
Hmm.
okay.
I wanted to touch on the first part. What is community? I
Mhm.
think that's a really interesting question. And Antonio was talking about the programming that's happening and these like darker forces that are at play. And I think this word is it's being like well, a lot of words. This happened with a lot of words right now. But like the word, there's confusion being put into the word itself. So like
Mhm.
I'll hear the word used all the time, like, oh, this community and that community, like the media will use this word. Like that's not a community. Like, what are you talking about? Like, you
Yeah,
know what I mean? Like they
words
use
can
the
be
word
co-opted and
very
vectored.
strangely and freely, and like I don't even know if we know what a true community. Well, most people don't know what a true community is. So they did, but so the word's just used in this way of like manipulating people to because they don't have community So then they're told that they're in a community, but they're actually not in a community. It's like it's the whole like layers of manipulation going on. So I think it's a
Mhm.
great question. Yeah. What is community?
Mhm.
Yeah.
And I recently saw something on the subject of community, which is, I think, so true. You know, we lived for thousands and thousands and thousands of years in communities, in
Yes.
very close, tight-knit communities where we had a whole support system very close. You know, for thousands of years, we were held in our communities. And just very recent, you know, and we have that. All those memories are stored in our DNA and our the consciousness of our being. And just very recently, we that's been taken away from us in this urban development and this separation and living in this individualized, separated life and so much more, you know. And so there is this deep desire, I think, within ourselves for that. And I posted that in the text, community, the core root, common unity. And so I think it's urgent that, and I think that's why the movement, if you will, of consciousness is heading towards that in looking for that because we so desperately need to have that again, to have these circles and to have that support system and have that community and get away from this, living in boxes in isolation that electronically controlled. I mean, those are the two paradigms. So, I think we come from community and we have to return to community, like true community, sitting down in the circle, listening to each other. And it's happening. I think the movement, community, true community, there's many conscious communities now springing up around the world. The indigenous people of the world are actually leading, I think, a very huge movement of community, trying to invite, the developed world. It's like, and we have all of the prophecies from, the Hopi to the, you know, that they're going to lead the way. And I think that those communities actually we have a lot to learn from them, to regain that because we've lost it. We Western society, we have lost our communities. And what, like you were saying, Brian, what is being defined now as community has nothing to do. I mean, but that's
Just because you're living in, well, I'll say one thing that's not community. Just because you're living in close proximity to other people doesn't mean you're in community with them.
right.
A la
Mhm.
urban areas, as you mentioned.
Yeah.
Mhm.
Yeah,
So
that's the distortion of meaning that is being promoted by the forces of unconsciousness to keep us separated and to
yeah.
keep us away from
And
community. So
I put
yeah,
the other way too. If you're connecting with someone online, doesn't mean you're in community with them necessarily either. There's that. That's another strange use of the word
yeah.
as well.
But there is actually I do believe that it is one of the benefits. Again, it's like a double-edged sword, social media and the internet, it's being used again. It's this is we are in this tug of war, online, in person, everywhere between the forces of consciousness and the forces of unconscious. So there are like this. Look at us right here. This is a community.
This is a community
Online, this is a community. And
because we're in
so
communion right now.
I'm very actually grateful, and that's why I try to come as often as I can because
Thank you for that.
I'm also searching for that, you know,
Mhm.
like-hearted individuals with which to share, and so we can actually the effect of even if we're sitting halfway around the world, this actually has an effect.
For
This
sure.
has
Yeah.
an effect. This conversations that we
Yeah.
have this effect. So,
Yeah.
and and the work that you do, Brian, and I'm sometimes I look up to you like it's like, damn, that's what I want to do. I look at what you've been doing, and because that's what I would love to do. I consider myself like a healer. My deepest burning desire is to help heal and and do and just burst in love and heal and help and and I see you and it's like I want to do that. And so anyway, I think you're a great example.
Thank you
Mhm.
very much, Antonio. Muchas gracias. Thank you all for being here. Sean, you are a man of great wisdom, great friends. We're here every Thursday night, 5 p.m. Mountain Time. So you're welcome to join us anytime. Love to have you. And
Thank you, Sean.
Yeah,
Thank
nice to
you.
meet
Thank
you,
you
Sean.
all. Great to
Thank you very
meet you
much
all.
for your words today. Appreciate
And
it.
thank you for everything you shared, and for the connection that we've had tonight. And Brian, again, thanks for inviting me. And I'll be here when moved to do so, and moved and enabled. We'll just put it that way.
We'll keep the conversation going forever and
Yes.
ever and ever.
Mhm.
Okay.
Bye, everybody.
All right.
All
Have
right.
a good week.
Good night.